Starmer's taking Maria off to Venice for the weekend. She's going to be going up and down in their gonorrhea.
You know the show. Big laughs. Actors breaking character. Agnes Brown yelling at someone for absolutely no reason. Mrs. Brown's Boys went from a scrappy stage act to a BBC juggernaut and a Christmas TV tradition for millions. But behind the laughter, the catchphrases, and that iconic purple cardigan is a very different story. A story about burnout, pay disputes, family pressure, and what it really costs to be part of the O'Carroll family empire. From a 26-year veteran quietly walking away with nothing but a Waitrose bag, to legal battles that shattered the show's one big family image, today we're breaking down the real reasons why some of Mrs. Brown's Boys' most beloved actors finally said enough. Rory Cowan. Let's start with the exit that genuinely shook Mrs. Brown's Boys to its core. Rory Cowan wasn't just playing Rory Brown. He was Rory Brown for 26 years. That's not an exaggeration. From the original radio sketches in the 90s, to the touring stage shows, to becoming one of BBC One's biggest comedy hits, Rory was there from the very beginning, watching a small project turn into a full-blown television empire. So when he announced in July 2017 that he was leaving, fans were stunned. His final performance took place at London's O2 Arena, a massive sold-out show. And here's the detail that still stings. After the curtain fell, after more than 2 decades dedicated to one character, Rory packed his belongings into a small Waitrose plastic bag and quietly walked away. No farewell episode, no celebration or dramatic goodbye. Just gone. So what pushed him to that point? According to Rory himself, the answer was painfully simple. He was exhausted and unhappy. He admitted he hadn't been happy for 18 to 24 months before quitting. Not because of feuds or falling outs, but because the work had become relentless. Endless touring. The same jokes. The same format. Year after year. Once Mrs. Brown's Boys became a locked-in BBC format, nothing could change. Rory explained that everything had to stay exactly the same. Same setups, same routines and punchlines. After 26 years, it stopped being fun and started feeling like a trap. But the real breaking point was far more personal. During a tour, Rory's mother collapsed and was rushed to hospital. Doctors initially feared a stroke, but she was later diagnosed with dementia. His sister called from Australia and told him the doctors said he needed to come home immediately. He couldn't. The production's insurance company told him that his mother being ill wasn't a sufficient reason to leave the tour. He was told that if she died, then he could have time off for the funeral. That moment changed everything. Rory has never publicly attacked Brendan O'Carroll or the show, but it's clear something broke. When a job won't let you be with your sick mother, the love drains out fast. Brendan was reportedly supportive, even comparing Rory's exit to Ronaldo leaving Manchester United. There was no public feud, just a quiet ending. After leaving, Rory admitted he no longer keeps in touch with the cast. Not out of bitterness, just closure. Brendan occasionally texts him about repeat fees, and that's it. The show tried to keep Rory Brown alive with a bizarre plastic surgery storyline, revealing a new actor under the bandages. Fans were confused, but the message was clear. For Rory Cowan, walking away meant choosing his life over a role that had consumed it for 26 years. And honestly, that choice makes perfect sense. But if you think Rory's exit was dramatic, wait until you hear about the departure that ended in lawyers, legal action, and a pay dispute that tore the so-called family apart. What happened when two actors discovered they were earning significantly less than their co-stars? Gary Hollywood. Now, if Rory Cowan's departure was quiet and dignified, Gary Hollywood's exit was the complete opposite. This is where things got messy, public, and downright ugly. And it all came down to one thing: money. Gary Hollywood played Dino Doyle, the fabulous Scottish hairdresser, from the moment Mrs. Brown's Boys premiered on BBC One in 2011. For nearly a decade, Gary brought Dino to life with perfect comic timing and genuine warmth. Fans absolutely loved him, and his on-screen relationship with Rory Brown, first played by Rory Cowan, then Damian McKieran, was one of the show's highlights. But in 2020, everything fell apart spectacularly. Earlier that year, Gary Hollywood and Damian McKieran discovered something that absolutely floored them. They were being paid significantly less than other cast members, particularly Brendan O'Carroll and Jennifer Gibney, O'Carroll's real-life wife, who plays Kathy Brown. And we're not talking about a small difference here. This was a substantial pay gap that left both actors feeling confused, hurt, and, frankly, disrespected. Think about it from their perspective. They're appearing in the same episodes, doing the same amount of work, contributing to the same show that's pulling in millions of viewers and making the BBC tons of money. But they're earning considerably less than their co-stars? That's going to sting. So Gary and Damian did what anyone would do. They raised the issue with the show's producers. They weren't asking for anything unreasonable, just equal pay for equal work. But here's where it gets absolutely infuriating. Instead of having a mature conversation about fair compensation, the producers responded by cutting Gary's role. Gary was told he would only be appearing in one of that year's Christmas specials. Basically, a demotion disguised as a scheduling decision. For Gary, this was the last straw. It felt like punishment for daring to speak up about unfair treatment. Even Jennifer Gibney, Brendan's wife, tried to convince Gary to stay, but his mind was made up. He was done, and the fallout was devastating. In an interview with OK Magazine in August 2021, Gary opened up about what he called the worst year of his life. He said dealing with everything was exhausting and took a serious emotional toll. He felt like he wasn't being paid equally, wasn't getting any explanations for decisions being made about his role, and when he tried to resolve it professionally, nothing was done. He was just disregarded. Gary was particularly upset about the spin-off show All Round to Mrs. Brown's, claiming he was paid less than other cast members for that as well. It was like a pattern of being treated as somehow less valuable, and Gary had simply had enough of it. The saddest part of this whole situation? Gary revealed that he hasn't been able to get in touch with Brendan O'Carroll since their falling out. For someone who'd been part of the Mrs. Brown's Boys family since 2011, nearly a decade of his life, that complete breakdown of communication must have been absolutely devastating. These weren't just colleagues. They were supposed to be like family. Both Gary Hollywood and Damian McKieran were so upset about their treatment that in 2021, they launched legal action against Brendan O'Carroll, the BBC, and TV production firm Hungry Bear Media. The legal claims cited discrimination and unfair dismissal. That's how serious this got. Lawyers, formal complaints, the whole works. When the 2020 Christmas and New Year specials aired without Gary and Damian, something interesting happened. The show received its worst viewing figures to date. Coincidence? Probably not. Fans noticed the absence, and they weren't happy about it. The show tried to explain away Dino and Rory's absence by having Agnes casually mention they'd traveled to Wuhan, which, given the timing with the pandemic, was Let's just say it was a choice. Both characters were essentially retired from the show completely. In October 2020, it was confirmed that Rory and Dino would no longer appear in the program following the pay dispute. But there's actually a silver lining to Gary's story. Despite all the heartbreak and drama, Gary said leaving Mrs. Brown's Boys gave him a newfound freedom he hadn't experienced in years. Over the 9 years he was tied to the show, he'd been offered some incredible projects that he had to turn down because of his commitment to Mrs. Brown's Boys. But after leaving, many of those opportunities came back around. Gary told reporters that while Mrs. Brown's Boys enabled him to have a nice life and gave him financial stability, it also held him back creatively. He'd played Dino for so long that he was desperate to do a serious dramatic role to show his range as an actor, to be seen as more than just the camp hairdresser. Leaving the show finally gave him that chance. Brendan O'Carroll denied the pay dispute claims publicly, but the damage was done. The tight-knit family atmosphere the show was famous for had clearly fractured, and 2 beloved characters were gone forever. But there was the silent partner in this dispute, the actor who replaced a legend and then disappeared without a trace. Who was it? Damian McKieran. Let's talk about Damian McKieran, because his departure is one of the strangest and quietest in Mrs. Brown's Boys history. Damian was brought in during 2017 to replace Rory Cowan as Rory Brown, which is not an easy gig by any measure. He stepped into a role that had been defined by one actor for 26 years. Fans were skeptical at first, understandably, but Damian did what he could. He respected what Rory Cowan had built while adding his own spin, and over time, audiences warmed to him. On screen, his chemistry with Gary Hollywood worked. Their pairing as the show's gay couple felt natural, and for a while, it looked like Damian had settled into the role for the long haul. But his run only lasted about 3 years. Behind the scenes, Damian became caught up in the same pay dispute that ultimately pushed Gary Hollywood out in 2020. Both actors discovered they were being paid significantly less than other cast members. When the issue was raised, things quickly went downhill. What makes Damian's exit stand out is how completely silent it was. Unlike Gary, who spoke openly about the emotional toll and unfair treatment, Damian said almost nothing publicly. He was part of the same legal action and affected by the same pay disparities, yet he avoided interviews and never explained his side. One episode, he was there. The next, he simply wasn't. That silence says a lot. Whether it was legal advice or personal choice, Damian's departure felt abrupt and unacknowledged. No farewell, no storyline closure, just erased. The fact that Damian and Gary both left under the same circumstances makes one thing clear. This wasn't about personality clashes or performance issues. It was about how certain cast members were valued. Since leaving the show, Damian has continued acting and focused heavily on charity work, particularly with Irish children's health organizations. He moved on quietly, but his exit raised some very loud questions about fairness behind the scenes. But pay disputes and burnout aren't the only reasons people left. What happens when your actual family, working with your dad, and you have to pretend to be happily married to your ex-husband on camera every single day? Fiona O'Carroll. Now let's talk about a departure that hits differently because this one involves actual family. Fiona O'Carroll isn't just a cast member. She's Brendan O'Carroll's daughter, and she played Maria Brown for years. This wasn't just a job. It was a family business, which makes everything far more complicated. By 2022, Fiona had quietly stepped back from the show, and the reasons behind it are more emotional than dramatic. After years of playing Maria, Fiona began to feel confined by the role. While the show gave her stability and kept her close to her family, it also locked her into an identity she was ready to outgrow. She wanted to tell her own stories, take on different projects, and exist outside the shadow of being Brendan O'Carroll's daughter playing his daughter on TV. That desire is completely understandable. But the situation became even heavier on a personal level. Fiona's real-life marriage to co-star Martin Delaney, who played her on-screen husband Dermot Brown, ended in divorce. Imagine having to go to work and portray a loving, happy marriage with your ex-husband while cameras roll and audiences laugh. That kind of emotional whiplash takes a serious toll. Every shared scene becomes a reminder of what's been lost, and the performance starts to feel forced. Then there's the family dynamic. How do you tell your father, the creator and star of the show, that his world has started to feel suffocating? Mrs. Brown's Boys is famously a family affair, with Brendan's wife and children all deeply involved. That closeness can be comforting, but it can also become claustrophobic. For Fiona, stepping back wasn't about drama or conflict. It was about reclaiming her independence, her creativity, and her sense of self beyond the show. And speaking of painful performances post-divorce, what about the other half of that broken marriage? The man who had to show up to work every day and pretend to love someone he was no longer with? Martin Delaney. Martin Delaney's exit is deeply tied to Fiona O'Carroll's, but it deserves its own focus because it highlights something we rarely talk about: the exhaustion of pretending to be happy when your real life is falling apart. Martin played Dermot Brown, Maria's husband, and for years he was a steady presence on Mrs. Brown's Boys. But in the early 2020s, something changed. He appeared less often. His lines were reduced, and then, quietly, he faded out of the show altogether. The reason was painfully human. Following his divorce from Fiona O'Carroll, Martin was expected to continue playing a loving husband to his ex-wife on screen. Imagine trying to process the end of your marriage while being asked to perform affection, intimacy, and domestic comedy with the very person you're trying to emotionally detach from. That isn't just uncomfortable, it can be genuinely damaging. Every romantic scene becomes a reminder of what failed. Every scripted argument meant for laughs risks reopening real wounds. The line between acting and reality blurs until the job itself becomes a constant trigger. Unlike other cast exits, Martin's departure wasn't announced or explained. There was no farewell episode or storyline. He simply appeared less, then not at all. A quiet exit that mirrored the emotional weight behind it. And that silence says a lot. Not every departure needs a scandal or a fight. Sometimes leaving is about survival, about choosing mental health over professional obligation. Martin stepping away was about giving himself the space to grieve, heal, and rebuild without having to perform joy for an audience. And when you look at it that way, his decision is one of the most understandable exits of all. But with so many departures for so many different reasons, what's really going on behind the scenes at Mrs. Brown's Boys? Is the O'Carroll family empire as warm and welcoming as it appears on screen? The O'Carroll family dynamics. When family is the business. To understand why so many people left Mrs. Brown's Boys, you have to understand what makes it different from most shows. It isn't just a production, it's a family business. Brendan O'Carroll created the show based on his own mother. His wife, Jennifer, plays a main character. His children, Danny and Fiona, were part of the cast. Close friends filled out the ensemble. On paper, it sounds beautiful. A family creating art together and building a massive success story from nothing. And in many ways, it was beautiful. The warmth on screen wasn't fake. These people genuinely know each other. They share history, relationships, inside jokes, and real affection. That authenticity became part of the show's DNA, and one of the reasons audiences connected to it so strongly. But family businesses come with their own pressures. When work and family become the same thing, there's no separation. A workplace issue becomes a personal issue. A disagreement at work becomes a family argument. Wanting to leave a job becomes emotionally tangled with loyalty, guilt, and obligation. You're not just quitting a role, you're stepping away from a family structure. That's why the pay dispute involving Gary Hollywood and Damian McKieran hit differently. It wasn't just a contract issue. It involved Brendan and Jennifer, the couple at the center of the family empire. A two-tier pay structure inside a business that publicly presented itself as one big family created a painful contradiction. There's also the issue of power. When one person is the creator, writer, star, and boss, who really gets to challenge decisions? Who gets to push for change? For non-family cast members, you're always an outsider. For actual family members like Fiona, the pressure is even heavier. How do you negotiate, disagree, or leave without damaging personal relationships? The success of Mrs. Brown's Boys was built on loyalty and long-term commitment. But the human cost is clear in these exits. Burnout, pay disputes, emotional exhaustion, identity loss. The show became a phenomenon. But behind the laughs, it quietly broke a lot of people along the way. So when you look at all these exits together, the burnout, the pay disputes, the family drama, the divorces, what does it all really mean for the future of Mrs. Brown's Boys? The pattern of departures, what it all means. When you look at these exits together, a clear pattern emerges. These weren't random career moves. These were people hitting their breaking point. First, the workload was relentless. Mrs. Brown's Boys wasn't just a TV show. It was constant touring, specials, and spin-offs. Rory Cowan couldn't even visit his dying mother because of tour obligations. That kind of grind isn't sustainable. Second, the rigid format killed creativity. Once the BBC locked the show into a formula, performers were stuck repeating the same routines year after year. Third, pay disparities shattered trust. Gary Hollywood and Damian McKieran discovered they were earning less than others doing the same work. That breeds resentment fast. Fourth, the family business dynamic complicated everything. Outsiders never fully belonged, and actual family members felt trapped by loyalty. Add in emotional strain like Fiona and Martin performing a happy marriage post-divorce, and the picture becomes clear. The show continues, but ratings have slipped, and fans notice what's missing. These departures tell a bigger story about burnout, inequality, and the human cost of success. And honestly, choosing your peace over a paycheck is sometimes the bravest move you can make. If you enjoyed this breakdown, like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. Did they make the right call?